winds down on the first-time homebuyer tax credit, one senator is looking past next month's deadline and proposing a bill to expand and extend the program to all home buyers. He is Republican Senator Johnny Isakson of Georgia. Good morning, Senator. Good to see you.
Good morning.
So you co-sponsored a piece of legislation with a colleague of yours in the Senate suggesting that we need to expand this and we also need to extend it. Walk me through how it would change as a result of this.
Well, the current tax credit's available only to first-time home buyers, and it's means tested to a maximum joint income of $150,000. What our amendment does, Senator Dodd, Senator Lieberman, and myself, is extends the $8,000 credit through June 30th of next year, raises the income limitation to a joint income of $300,000 or less, and expands the credit to include any home buyer that buys and occupies the home as their residence.
One of the big issues in the real estate sector, which you obviously know a lot about since you spent many, many years in the real estate world, is the trade-up buyer. It's one thing to get the first-time home buyer, but it's another thing to get those who are willing to trade up into their next home. How does it impact them?
Well, it really opens the incentive to the move-up buyer, the corporate relocation transferee who's moving from, say, Connecticut to Georgia or Georgia to Seattle. That market is frozen. It's non-existent. Because there's no demand in that marketplace, values continue to decline, and individuals are losing equity in their homes. We need an incentive for sales that will take place sometime in the future to move forward now so we can begin to rebuild the entire housing market.
One of the assertions or the claims is that as many as 100,000 people might have been involved in some wrongdoing. The IRS is doing some investigation. If, in fact, they find that there was some manipulation in the system, does that hinder your ability to extend this?
Well, first of all, at any time in society, you're always going to have somebody who's trying to work around the rules to defraud the government or take advantage of a program. I seriously doubt that the IRS has let 100,000 people slip by defrauding them. The best enforcement agency we have is the Internal Revenue Service, and they enforce this tax credit. So I think if there has been any abuse, it will quickly be taken care of.
The skeptics will say, here's one more program to try to put some fertilizer on the economy to stimulate growth, which will ultimately, once the program ends, fail. Or perhaps not fail, but you'll see demand decline. How do you offset that? Do you suggest that by that time the economy will have recovered?
Well, I suggest that they look at history. It's rare we have a past event that worked, but in 1974 we had a housing crisis every bit as bad as this. The Congress and the President passed what was then a $2,000 tax credit. In 1 year's time, the housing market had recovered, values had stabilized, and the economy began to come back. The housing market has led us into this. It's going to lead us out of this recession. And those assertions that it's just a false sense of support just aren't right. They were proven wrong in 1975.
And Senator, at the same time that you're talking about, a new job tax credit was instituted to create jobs in this country. Some say it created a minimum of 700,000. Some say it created as many as 2 million. What about creating jobs?
Well, the study on my original proposal, which I introduced this in January of last year, was the tax credit in housing open to all buyers in 1 year would generate 700,000 home sales and 587,000 jobs. That's pretty good economic stimulus in my book.
That is pretty good economic stimulus. Let's talk about the possibility of a second stimulus package. I was talking to Wilbur Ross, the famed investor, earlier. He suggests, among many others, that this administration is headed toward a second stimulus. What do you make of that? Do you support it?
I think what the administration, I heard the president's remarks last week when he talked favorably about extending the housing tax credit, unemployment compensation, and COBRA benefits, but not another stimulus like what happened in February. I heard Governor Rendell from Pennsylvania, Governor Chris from Florida talking this morning. That stimulus that we passed earlier in the year ended up just really saving jobs and education and environmental concerns. It didn't do much to create economic development through roads, bridges, highways. So I don't think there's another stimulus coming except for targeted things like extending unemployment compensation insurance and extending COBRA benefits and hopefully this tax credit.
Senator, I would be remiss if I didn't get your thoughts right now on health care. There's a lot of very angry politicians about the concept of a $250 billion worth of credits associated with doctors and Medicare being pulled aside from the rest of the health care reform bill. Where is this headed? Where do you stand? And is this thing going to pass this year?
Well, what's happened is the Democratic leader has pulled out what's called the doc fix, or the sustainable growth rate formula for doctors, and has put a fix in to see to it that doctors' reimbursements basically stay flat. He's pulled it outside of the health care debate in return for an agreement not to include tort reform in the debate. My doctors in Georgia and doctors I talk to don't want to give up reform of tort reform for the sake of just freezing reimbursements. So I think they're going to have a tough time passing. In fact, we have a cloture vote today at 2 o'clock to try and end debate on this bill that the leaders introduced, and I don't think they'll get cloture, so I don't think it's going to happen.
What do you think?
We need to repeal SGR, we need to reform it, but not by making a deal like that.
And finally, do you think this bill, a bill, perhaps with a trigger option, is where we're headed, and are you going to support this?
Well, you know, the bill isn't even totally written yet. I've read the Help Committee bill because I'm on that committee. I'm going to read the entire bill. I'm going to know what I'm voting on. But I will say this. To us to destroy the system that provides 86% of the American people with their health care in return for just insuring 14% of the public is not the right way to go. I think we ought to be dealing with better affordability and accessibility for the uninsured rather than tearing apart what we have today.
Senator Isakson, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, coming up next, many small banks, they're struggling.